Good morning. Today's topic is on free... Oh, ayan na naman. Can't turn your phone while doing live. Alright, we'll have to do it this way. Okay, apparently the rotation device will not work on my phone today, so we'll have to do it this way. Good morning. Today's topic is on the freedom of speech, of expression, and of the press. A major issue has come up due to Assistant Secretary Mocha Uson's request to have Rappler reclassified as social media pursuant to pursuant to the MPC's own description of what constitutes mainstream media, or what constitutes a member of the MPC. The issue rotates primarily on whether or not Rappler is considered a news organization. This is its defense. According to Assistant Secretary Mocha Uson, pursuant to the MPC's own rules, if the the organization that seeks to be covering Malacanang under Malacanang Press Corps, it must have a broadcast arm or a publication. If not, then it must be a news organization with reporters and correspondents. In the meantime, however, ASEC Mocha has been attacked for attempting to restrict the freedom of speech. However, she has answered back that there is no such restriction but a mere reclassification, which brings to rise a whole different issue. And what is the issue here? The issue primarily lies on, is reclassification a restriction? And if it is a restriction, who is oppressing whom? Assuming that reclassification will will transfer Rappler to the jurisdiction of the Office of Social Media, which is administered by ASEC Mocha, what is going to happen is that it will also fall under the rules on accreditation, which are interim, the interim rules on accreditation of the Office of Social Media. Accreditation is usually on a per event basis, and each event will subject the person who wants to cover it to the same rules, but the rules are the requirements are very low. You only need 1,000 followers, must have an established social media presence, etc. So there is no question that Rappler will be able to comply with the requisites of accreditation under the social media office. But why is this a problem for apparently the traditional media is weighing in? So why does this seem to be a problem for them? According to the practitioners in traditional media, some reporters have posted their opinions online, and as well as some journalists. From what they understand is that reclassification is a form of repression or oppression of the freedom of the press, which is of course incorrect. The constitutional provision states, rather simply, that no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech, of expression, and of the press. No law shall be passed. Okay. The reclassification by ASEC Mocha, the request for reclassification by ASEC Mocha, first of all, is not a law. It is not even a rule. It is merely recognition of the platform that is being used by Rappler to conform with the standards that are set, with the rules that are set within the PCOO. The MPC has its own rules for accrediting its own members, and the PCOO Social Media Office has its own rules for accrediting social media practitioners. And both intentions are to cover Malacanang. Is there a right to cover Malacanang? There isn't any, because what the Constitution prescribes is freedom of speech, of expression, and of the press. And what are the characteristics of these? The characteristics of these is expression. Actually, redundant nga eh. In the minutes of the constitutional discussions, on the discussions of the Constitution for this provision, actually a single one of them would have sufficed. Freedom Freedom of speech would have covered freedom of the press. Freedom of expression would have covered freedom of speech and of the press. Freedom of the press is actually freedom of speech. And so our constitutional provision is actually redundant. But what is it protecting? It is protecting an utterance. It is protecting speech. What you write, what you say, what you broadcast, what you post on your Facebook, that is freedom of speech. That is freedom of the press when you publish it. That is freedom of expression. It does not cover access to information, which is a totally different constitutional provision by itself. The constitutional provision reads, oops, wala ko yung ano ko. According to the Constitution itself, let me just get that so I'll state it. Access to information should be guaranteed. So that is actually what is being fought here. Not the freedom to express yourself, not the freedom to write, and not the freedom to broadcast, but the freedom to access the information that Malacanang provides. So, what does it say? It says that the right of the people to information on matters of public concern shall be recognized. So, right of the people to information on matters of public concern. Okay? It means that, in addition to which, the Constitution says access to official records, to documents and papers pertaining to official acts, transactions, or decisions, as well as to government research data used as a basis for policy development shall be afforded the citizen, subject to such limitations as may be provided by law. What does this mean? Is accessing the president a right? No. What is a right is the access to official records and to documents and papers pertaining to official acts, transactions, or decisions. Access to the president is not a right. Access to Malacanang and coverage of Malacanang events is not a right. These things are privileges. And both social media and traditional media are supposed to be on equal footing by now because of the recognition of new media. In fact, we have a new undersecretary in PCOO, Undersecretary Lorraine Badoy, who is the undersecretary for new media. This is the way of government, of the executive, recognizing the various forms wherein the freedom of expression, of speech, and of the press can be exercised. Okay, so this should be clear. The concerns arising about supposedly the oppression of the freedom of speech is misplaced. What is very clear here is that the right is to the... Ayan. Okay, so we're back. Sorry. So we're back. Again, we will reiterate. What is being fought here is not the freedom of speech, not the freedom of expression, and not the freedom of the press. What is very clear here is that all of these have been guaranteed because no law has been passed abridging the freedom of anybody to write, to broadcast, or to post their opinions on Facebook. Okay? So nobody is being prevented from expressing themselves, least of all, any member of the media. So the president also does not. Okay, so clearly we are being distracted. We are being distracted because there are some people who think that there is a vested, who think that the coverage of Malacanang, they have placed an inordinate value on the coverage of Malacanang. They have placed a value on it so that now it becomes something that they feel that they have to fight for. It is not necessary. The recognition of various forms of expression or various forms of delivering information to the public is a reality we can no longer revise. It is a reality we can no longer go back to. So, what we need to do is recognize the participation of new media in delivering information to the public. We will reiterate, there is no, or there ought to be no monopoly on who delivers information to the public because even the government has this obligation. And as a matter of fact, in undertaking the obligation to deliver information to the public, the government can recognize the various forms of media that can deliver that information. Okay? So, in the end, what it amounts to is this little piece of real estate we call Malacanang, and the ability to occupy that space in order to cover issues of national concern. Sinasabotahe ba ang video ko? Well, that's also possible, but we're not saying anything here that is not available online. All of this information is simply put together. So, does the Malacanang Press Corps have the power to cover Malacanang? Well, we're not sure yet. ASEC MOCA has requested for the documents covering Malacanang Press Corps in order to determine what is its character. Is Malacanang Press Corps merely a club, recognizing people who are authorized to cover Malacanang? Or is it an authorized entity with legal personality that is recognized by the Office of the Presidential Spokesman to cover Malacanang events? So, alam nyo, it's not blurry. It's either the connection or but it's not my phone because I can see the feedback. Okay. Again. So let me see what your questions are. So on this issue, the problem isn't really that both parties are mistaken or that any party is correct. The problem is the mischaracterization of the issue as an issue of freedom of speech. This is not a freedom of speech or freedom of the press issue. This is an issue about accessing information guaranteed by the Constitution, except not in this form. Again, the Constitution says access to official documents, not access to people, not access to particular press conferences, which the whole idea, in fact, of a press conference and the whole idea of a press briefing is simply to provide the most efficient way to deliver information to the people. So, again, I will reiterate, the purpose for press conferences or Malacanang press briefings are to deliver the information to people, an efficient way of delivering information to the people. Now, historically, the press has been the most efficient way of delivering to the people. What with television and print media, publications, all of these used to be the most efficient way to deliver information. The problem lies... Alright. I'm sorry, the signal really is bad, probably due to the inclement weather. Okay. So, yeah, for those of you who are having problems, the replay might be easier to watch. So I will reiterate, sorry, I have to go back because we lost our train of thought. This is not, the problem lies not in whether or not any speech or any rights have been suppressed. There is no right that is being suppressed here. What is the problem is the mischaracterization of the problem. Rappler has indicated that this is a freedom of speech issue, and this has been reiterated by some media practitioners. And in doing so, they have added to the confusion. Nobody is being prevented from speaking. Nobody is being prevented from publishing. Nobody is being asked to change anything that they have published. And nobody has been asked to remove anything. What is being, so the characterization of as a freedom of speech issue is misplaced. Instead, what this is the delivery, simply the delivery of information to the public. Now, historically, I have to go back. Historically, mass media has been the most efficient way of delivering government information to the people. As a matter of fact, originally, when television franchises were first being awarded in the United States, one of the obligations of each television station was to give at least 1 hour to public service, and that 1 hour is now what is known as the evening news. Now, what Congress in the United States failed to do was to impose a restriction on what can be put in the evening news. They did not restrict the stations from allowing advertisers for the evening news. So what happened next is that news now competes with regular programming. It competes for ratings because ratings mean advertisers. and advertisers bring revenue. If the delivery of the news was purely for public service, then advertising and other revenue would have no place in it. But that is the state of our mass media now. So our mass media practitioners, our mass media outlets, the television stations, the publications of any sort, they are commercial ventures. And they are commercial ventures that are competing with each other. And now they have to compete also with new media, which is online delivery of information. What does that mean? It means that whenever a television station or a major publication requires the restriction of other media from covering a particular beat or covering particular aspects of government, what they are in effect asking for is to protect their industry. Okay? They are not asking to protect their freedom of speech. They are asking the protection of their industries, their businesses, and all of these other interests. These are not public interests. These are private interests, and the interest to make money out of this coverage. This is not altruism. It just so happens that the press is covered by these two basic freedoms, the freedom of speech and the freedom of information. But they know very well that there is no monopoly on it. So, when they say that they are being restricted, when they say that the freedom of speech is being suppressed, those same freedoms apply to new media as well. Those same freedoms apply to any online publication, and those same freedoms apply to social media, particularly in this Philippine setting right now. Why? Because new media, because online publication, because new media and social media are now the new and more efficient deliverers of information. It has now become far more efficient, or is getting to the point where it is becoming far more efficient in delivering information, as well as obtaining feedback so that government can react to such information or can react to the reactions of its own people. So, can you please stop commenting na sinasabotahe to? Please comment on what is being said. I already know. Okay, it's probably the weather. I will reiterate. The problem isn't freedom of speech. The problem is the protection of certain commercial interests that, of course, would like some kind of monopoly, or at least the first crack at certain information. Okay? So, I will be ready for your questions in a little while. We will recap so that for those who have been subjected to poor internet signal. Number one, the problem was initially characterized as a freedom of speech issue. It is not. It is more a freedom of information issue. However, the right to information is the right to access documents. The right, The right to access documents, official records, and papers pertaining to official transactions or decisions. There is no right, for instance, to be present at a government board meeting. There is no right, therefore, to cover Malacanang. What there is a right to access information. So if there are documents pertaining to a Malacanang press conference, the right is to access that. So no person also, or no entity, media or otherwise, has a monopoly on the access to this information. Instead, what must be clarified here is what appears to be an indirect restriction of new media. When Rappler said that moving it to social media amounts to the suppression of the freedom of speech, this also amounted to not just the suppression of the freedom of speech, but a restriction on their freedom of speech. It was an inherent recognition that social media is in fact being restricted, that social media is in fact the one that is being regulated. It is in fact the one that is being marginalized. Why? Because as soon as the threat to Rappler appeared that they will be characterized as social media, traditional media started mouthing off the words that this amounts to suppression. Therefore, this is a recognition that new media is being suppressed. And the weird thing about it is that this seems to be okay to the practitioners in mainstream media. Understand this, the freedom of speech is a freedom for everybody, new media, old media, or even individuals. So, by saying that it is okay for social media to be restricted is not okay. The Constitution says that no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech, of expression, or of the press. But when it is traditional media who encourages restrictions, who encourages regulation, and this was very apparent during the Senate hearing under Senator Grace Poe, the opinions that were coming from traditional media and traditional media practitioners was this, very simple, that social media needs to be restricted. However, the Constitution guarantees otherwise. So what does this say? But the additional layer to this is that traditional media is commercial. Traditional media are usually businesses. And by asking to be the sole arbiter, the sole deliverer of information to the people, this now becomes a serious constitutional issue. Why? Because social media in general is free. Most of the practitioners are not paid for it. Most of the practitioners, if they are paid in amounts that do not really make the endeavor a viable one. In other words, social media is up against big business. This is the true characterization of the problem. The problem isn't freedom of speech. The problem is commercial interests that are now being threatened in their perch as the sole arbiter of information, the sole deliverer of government information. This is not fair, and this, in fact, violates the very freedoms that are guaranteed by the Constitution. Questions? Can you please stop commenting on the quality of the video and just ask your questions? What could have prompted, Gilan says, what could have prompted Senator Poe to say that Moca's request to reclassify some of the members of MPC is marginalizing mainstream? How can one marginalize mainstream? Mainstream nga eh. Unless she acknowledges that Rappler is neither here nor there. It's a hybrid. We do not know what could have prompted Senator Poe, but what it's likely that she was spurred on by opinions that were also issued by mainstream. Next. Traditional media was positioned in our brains as legitimate media. Actually, there's no such thing as legitimate media unless you're talking about Kaohsiao media, which is essentially fly-by-night or unregistered but mass media in traditional form. Princess Beatrice Ong says, watching from South Korea, ask lang po, si Spock's okay umalis na pagka-spokesperson? No, I don't think so. Sorry to mainstream media, says Romarico Salvador. We are now in the post-industrial information age. Thus, control is fair game or level competition is level. Erasmus Port says, if MPC is just an organization covering the president, then SOCMED can come up with its own organization so it can also access Malacanang. It's not necessary. Organization for the coverage of a particular thing is not a requirement for its coverage. As a matter of fact, social media's only requirement is that you have a following and that you are consistent in posting. So why will you add additional requirements? If I sound mataray, it is only because I would rather see comments not on the quality of the video or the quality of because it's been said so many times that I would rather answer your questions. Josh Pastor says, what's taking Secretary Andonar too long to decide on Asset Moca's request? The government regulation is that you have 15 days to act on a request. Wala pa namang 15 days. So Secretary Andonar has not delayed. Musings, Christy Padilla asks, will the request of Moca move forward? We don't know that. We don't have a crystal ball. Musings page says, MPC has no written bylaw submitted to Malacanang. We don't know that because ASEC Moca has simply asked for all of the documents and it has not yet been acted on. Mark Anthony de los Reyes says, what can an individual or netizen do to uphold this? Uphold what? Genesis Nor says, understood, it is indeed commercial. Park Yuan Mi says, to be fair naman kay Senator Po, baka mali na dinig niya sa balita. Agree. Let's wait till Senate. Yes, I agree that Senator Po is generally a well-balanced person. Pinoy Uzi says, what is Maria Ressa talking about in ASEAN? I really don't know, as I haven't monitored her yet. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I think we can terminate this discussion. But, okay, Romulo Borja says, good day, attorney. Meron po ba tayong batas na nagpaparusa ng isang misinformation or misleading information na nagawa ng isang mainstream media? Kung meron po, bakit di nakakasuhan ng ABS-CBN? Okay, this question, this needs to be answered because it is repetitive. First, there are laws. False news is covered by Article 154 of the Revised Penal Code, which penalizes false news that affects the public interest, public safety, public order, etc. Libel, cyberbullying, all of these, inciting to sedition, all of these are criminal laws that are in effect a restriction of the freedom of speech. However, okay, when you ask bakit hindi nakakasuhan, I will ask you, why haven't you sued them? Okay? You do not depend on what did Kennedy say. Do not ask what your government can do for you, what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. If nobody has filed a case, it's because nobody has filed a case. Okay? While it is true that the Department of Justice may also on its own cause the investigation against these media organizations or media outlets. The problem lies in the fact that, and we have seen this happen, that the media organization's first line of defense will be the suppression of the freedom of speech. However, as long as these laws exist, these are restrictions on the freedom of speech. Again, it goes back down to this. Bakit hindi sila nakakasuhan? Kayo, ba't di nyo kinakasuhan? Senator Trillanes seems to be taking it on himself to file cases left and right. You can do the same thing too, because the information is clearly available. Cecil Nigo says, ma'am, saan po yung statement ni Senator Grace? Official ba yun? Di nakita, di nakapag-follow sa FB niya. It was reported on by, ironically, mainstream media, but it has been answered by Asek Mocha on her blog. Park Yon Mi says, MPC should step up their game kung ayaw nilang ma-question sila. Napaka-bias ng report, lalo na ng Rappler, nasa harap na nila ang nagsasali, but then pag sinulat nila, super twisted. Okay, so that is another issue. These are, the practitioners of mainstream media are primarily commercial in nature, and therefore require themselves have to be competitive. So what does it mean when you have to be competitive? One, these mainstream media practitioners usually will bring out stories that they feel will get more hits or will get more, more patrons. More people will buy either the papers. If they are online, there will be more hits. If they're television, there will be more watchers. However, they seem to have miscalculated their business. They have been posting or they have been delivering news, yes, but the news does not appear to be palatable to the public that are their consumers. This is not a problem of government. This is a problem of the mainstream media itself, of the outlet itself. They have, in fact, brought the state of news reporting to this present stage. We have news programs that look like news magazines more than straight reporting. We have celebrities delivering the news. We have formats that are geared towards shorter attention spans or geared towards the more salacious elements of public interest, the public's interest. Perhaps mainstream media could take its cue from social media. Why is social media capable now of being more efficient in delivering the news? What is it that social media is saying that traditional media is not saying? What is it that makes social media efficient? far more available now. Maria Gemma Vitero says, how much will it cost for an ordinary citizen to file a case against a public official? If it is a criminal case, the cost is your time and whatever you're going to pay your lawyer, if your lawyer is going to be paid. How much will, Matthew Wilson says, I wish there were more people like you. No, you don't want that. Okay. J.W. Racha says, traditional media was positioned in our brains as legitimate media. Well, yeah, it's true, but it doesn't mean that they will always they will always have patrons, that they will always have consumers, that there will always be people who will want to watch or buy their product. If they're a commercial venture, then they have to be more competitive. But instead of competing, what they're trying to do is restrict the choices of the marketplace to just their product. And that also is unfair. Tess de Leonheimer says, you're so spot on with corporate TradMed versus SOCMED. Well, miscalculation at its finest. Danielle Choi says, mainstream media may not even be for profit, but for influencing public opinion for the owners. That is true. Although it is still a commercial transaction, it is indirect commercial transaction. Pinoy Uzi says, can we expect Loke to at least ask for erratum or at best call out the press representatives of media network who issues false or misleading news, like DOTR's Tugade statement, etc.? I think that is a reasonable request of the presidential spokesman. However, if it is the case of the DOTR, then Secretary Tugade would be the better person to issue the call out that his statement has not been presented fairly. Janelle J. Cruz says, Attorney, ano po masasabi niyo about lumabas na may mga nagraling na sinisisi si PRRD sa Yolanda? This is not exactly in point here, but it goes back to the freedom of speech. People are free to say whatever they want, including lies. However, if those lies or whatever they say constitute a crime, such as inciting to sedition or inciting to rebellion or anything that is punishable by the revised penal code, then that we can make those people liable for their statements. Otherwise, the rule is freedom of speech. Okay. Gilbert Kungan has a view. He says, off topic, deal with Rappler as if they're legitimate traditional news outfit. If you bring them down to a SOCMED classification, then they won't be bound to the strict regulations of traditional media, which they are already violating. What do you think of this, Attorney Chief? I think that I can trust ASEC Mocha to make the correct political reading on what she has requested. ASEC Mocha, for instance, also understands how government works, even assuming that her request is denied. The issue has now been brought to the public. The concern has now become public. What is being done to social media has now become public. She has, whether directly or indirectly, shown a light on how government has been dealing with social media. And while Malacanang has taken great pains to accredit social media, it has been traditional media that is perceived to be restricting social media. What happened? According to ASEC Mocha herself, when the interim rules on social media accreditation for Malacanang coverage of events had been issued, the critics came from traditional media. And in fact, to this day, many people are still asking for a regulation of social media. So what does that mean? It means that some people seem to believe that traditional media cannot be restricted, and yet social media should. That is incorrect. G.G. Dean says, social media is honest. We're not trying to twist or sensationalize stories just to gain popularity and subscribers or personal gains. But you know what? It doesn't even matter. What matters is that all media must have access to information, just as everybody is guaranteed that right under the Constitution. Diba? June Gonzalez, Mark Anthony de los Reyes says, what can the Malacanang do to address this coverage issue? Is to treat social media at the same level as traditional media. And if traditional media says they're not the same, then it becomes their burden to prove why it is not the same. Sarah Porter says, what would be Sarah Porter says, what would be the penalty if someone is found guilty of publishing fake news? I will reiterate, we've already discussed the criminal provisions of this case. Article 154 of the Revised Penal Code. Ellen Lee says, it pains me na parang initsupwera na lang tayo dito. Mawawala pala saysay ang mga efforts natin. Wala naman tayong kinita dito. Ako nga, puro eye bags na. Well, they do say that all of these things come at a cost. Okay, I will reiterate. I already got your comments regarding the problems on connectivity on this particular video, but I will also reiterate, as long as you can hear me, then please just post questions para hindi sayang yung oras. June Nerona says, ang problema po kasi ibang front page ng mainstream media at ibang laman ng buong story, kaya dapat kasuhan ang mga di nasasabi ng totoo on the front page itself. Okay, this brings us to the, thank you. This brings us to the issue now of fake news. Bakit? Mainstream media has often accused social media of being fake news. However, it doesn't say that they themselves are not practicing the same thing. We have caught several mainstream media outlets, or many articles that are published in mainstream media that clearly are reflecting opinion and are not straight news, and yet have been disingenuous about it, have not been totally honest about it. What else? Clickbait. Clickbait is a form of fake news. When you put in a headline that does not reflect the body of the statement, this is also a form of fake news. Why? Because its sole purpose is to get people to go to its site. It presents false information for the sole purpose of getting clicks. And traditional media is not exactly innocent about this sort of thing. That's why we are seeing, there was a headline that said, Mocha Uson apologizes to mainstream media, when the body of the statement clearly does not indicate that. Okay, so what are we seeing here? We are seeing the behemoth of traditional media, because when we're talking about two conflicting interests, we also have to look on which party is the more powerful one. And clearly, the financial and this clearly weighs in favor of traditional media. Traditional media is still more powerful in the sense that it is commercial. Reporters have to report because they're paid for it. A social media practitioner, not necessarily so. June Gonzalez says most of mainstream media now are pure commercialization, including social media as part of Malacanang Press Corps. Okay. J.W. Racha says, do you think this is just a way of mainstream media to keep SOCMED out of Malacanang because they tend to have more reach and influence, and that is at a disadvantage on the anti-government groups? That is possible. Tess De Leon Hammer says, the interaction of followers and readers with SOCMED is the seller of this new platform. It cannot be ignored anymore, and that, I agree. While traditional media has its own social media outlet, has its own online platforms, it does not immediately react to comments that are made on its pages. Unlike social media that can have an immediate reaction. Social media is, by the nature of its own technology, faster. And it can both post faster and react faster. The advantage of traditional media is that it has time. It has time to vet its information. It has time to edit its own publications. But due to its commercial nature, the problem of traditional media is the fact that they can have editorial policies. What are editorial policies? It is the publication or the broadcast entity's policy to angle particular stories, to highlight particular interests, to present particular stories or issues that are in keeping with its policy. For example, there are certain issues that cannot be covered by a broadsheet because there just simply is not enough space. The determination of what will be on the front page and what will be buried in the inner pages is a form of editorial policy. It is a form of creating an opinion, of presenting what is essentially an opinion. What is more important? if they put on the front page what they feel is more important, even if it is not, then this is a form also of slanting. Mainstream media has always prided itself in being objective, in delivering fearless news, in saying that they present absolute facts, or what they believe are facts, or vetted information that has been double checked. But we have been catching them now too. They have not necessarily been honest, at least in that regard. Okay? But this does not mean to say that they have been lying. They have just been presenting their own agenda. What is more important for them? What are the stories that can be highlighted? What particular angles of stories they would prefer to present? These are means also of traditional media in controlling information and presenting a particular side, or for fulfilling a particular agenda. I'm not saying this doesn't happen to SOCMED, but what I'm saying is that because of their commercial nature, this can be suspect. Erasmus Port says, any legal advice for MOCA's moves to be stronger? I'm not in a position to issue any legal advice to Asset MOCA. Ellen Lee says, nadali kasi tayo madalas sa headlines, sinasadya nila, etc. Yes, this is about clickbait. Joel Reyes says, MPC needs to move into the modern age. In the US, popular bloggers are given regular accreditation to cover the White House, Congress, and major sporting events. Major fashion events, too. Clarence Karen Mata says, traditional media is created to deliver news to the public at a time when media was limited technologically. With the advent of the internet, social media proved to be faster and more efficient. Excellent. Part me says, Rappler is questioning SOCMED na in the first place ay part din naman sila ng SOCMED, so dapat talaga maayos sila. Maria Gemma Vitero says, so kailangan natin magkaisa na dapat patas ang treatment ng mainstream at social media. Push natin na malagay din sa NPC ang social media. That's right. June Rona says, hindi po ba pwedeng isuspend ng government ang mga mainstream media na pagbabalita ng iba? Well, you know what? We've already done that. Remember when the president was new in office, he banned all other radio, TV, and broadsheets from covering him, and he only allowed PTV4. If he can do that before, he can do that again. President Duterte said, no. Please, no comments on being spokesperson because I am not, the position is not vacant and I am not in the running. Attorney, would it be more apt to call it online media outlets rather than social media? Yes, I agree. Attorney, agree ako sa move ni Asset MOCA to reclassify Rappler as SOCMED. You know what? Asset MOCA has already won. Simply by asking for reclassification of Rappler has brought out all of this information. It has also resulted in traditional media reacting in such a way that they admit that social media is being restricted, being regulated, or being marginalized. So if only for getting that kind of admission from traditional media and getting the admission that it's okay for them, then Asset MOCA has already won. Whether or not Secretary Andanar actually grants her request, this information is now out there. Now, the world understands the kind of dynamics that are going on. So, if Asset MOCA's sole intention was to get Rappler transferred to the administration of her division, then of course, you cannot characterize it as a success. But the success here lies in the fact that there is now more information out there about the dynamics between traditional and social media and how social media is being treated within government itself. Hector Herrera says, start to subscribe those media outlets who are not honest and also stop buying or watching them. That is correct. Von VR says, in any case, this issue grows. At the end of the day, it still relies on people who listen to and follow, and I hope iisa pa rin ang support at si government BDS. I agree. Okay, two more comments and then we have to go because we've been on for quite some time. What can you say po about Trillanes wanting to deactivate all BDS and SB or yung mga BDS bloggers na gusto niya? I'm not sure if Senator Trillanes actually said that. Let me look at his statement before I react. Mahirap naman madali tayo doon. June honest, watching. Sorry, that's happening. May dumating na. Attorney Parkioni says, true po ba na wala talagang say ang press corps sa Malacanang? Inalaw lang sila ng Malacanang, pero hindi sila talaga binigyan ng say. From what I understand from some practitioners is that they are individually accredited. However, there is a policy, clear policy, that what are being accredited are mainstream media. So whether or not it is MPC or the individuals who are there, clearly they are also the same persons who have objected to the coverage of Malacanang by social media. So it no longer becomes relevant whether MPC is an entity that is recognized or not. What is relevant here is how traditional media has been reacting to policies on coverage by social media. And by the way, social media has not yet begun to actually cover Malacanang. Okay. Last question. Sabi ni Romulo Borja, pasintabi lang po kung meron na kasi hindi ko po alam. Magkaroon sana ng sangay ng government na antabay sa mga false and misleading news na pinapalabas nila at sangayon sa mga. Well, if it is a violation of a criminal law, DOJ. Alan Lises, tingnan nyo kahit anong pilit natin sa mainstream media nagpalabas ang balita tungkol sa mga effort ng gobyerno para matuloy ang pangako ng programa ni Tatay Digong. Kaya buti na lang may SOCMED, etc. Okay, that was the last question. Thank you very much for watching. Before that, first, I hope you share this video. Second, we'll be putting up my own YouTube channel so that you don't have to watch it from other channels. And third, let's recap. This problem was initially characterized as a problem of the freedom of speech. When Asek Mocha asked that Rappler be transferred to her division because it should be classified as social media, many traditional media practitioners issued the call that this is a violation of the freedom of speech. It is not. What it is an issue of access to information. But the other layers into this problem are this. Social media has clearly been recognized now by traditional media by objecting to the transfer of Rappler. Traditional media practitioners have inadvertently recognized that social media is being marginalized and is actually the one that is being repressed or oppressed in its access to information. This is not an issue of whether or not anybody can publish, can speak, can write, or can express. This is an issue of who gets to sit in Malacanang and obtain access to that information. Now, the freedom of information that is stated in the Constitution states very clearly that this is access to documents, access to papers. This is not access to press conferences. Press conferences are a means of delivering information. And what is clearly at stake here is simply the access to be present at that press conference or press briefing. This is not, I reiterate, a problem of freedom of information. Adding an additional layer to the problem is the fact that most traditional media are commercial in nature, and therefore their interests in being the sole deliverer of information has that sort of characteristic, has that kind of interest embedded in itself. So, this is not, again, it is incorrect and misleading to say that this is an issue of the freedom of speech. This is an issue of being present at Malacanang press briefings and nothing more. There is no right to that. Therefore, when we ask for it, we must all be placed in at least similar positions. Traditional media has traditionally had access to Malacanang press briefings after the usual accreditation process. Why is social media being treated as the ugly stepsister? We cannot see any reason to do that. And therefore, the plea for social media, as led by Assistant Secretary Mocha Uzon, has been laid out for government. What are you going to do with social media? The people have recognized that it has long been marginalized, long been restricted, and long been the ugly stepsister. Time to move on. Time to recognize that new media has its place in Malacanang press briefings. Thank you very much for listening in. Please don't forget to share this video.